Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Ajahn Sumedho.
And today is Friday, the 17th of September, 2021. So thank you for taking some time to offer some more reflections. Today I was wondering if you could talk about wisdom. And to begin with, what is wisdom?
Well, you can divide it into two categories: worldly wisdom, which is how to survive in the world, and Dhamma wisdom, knowing reality for yourself. So when we talk about worldly wisdom, street wisdom, it's how to survive in the changing conditions that we call the world, because it's about survival and procreating the species and surviving in this changing world and universe that we feel very much a part of and intimidated by, and wonder about it. But Dhamma wisdom, in the words of, like Pali, the word panya, it's knowing that all conditions are impermanent. And this isn't just believing in that statement because it's in the scriptures and the Buddha said so, but it's this investigating yourself to see this for yourself, to have the direct insight. Like the taste of honey, you've got to taste it yourself to know what it really tastes like, where even the best descriptions, the best poems, and the chemical formulas, are good in themselves, but you don't really know what the taste is. The taste of Dhamma is through investigating the way things are. And the Buddha gave these very skillful two statements: all conditions are impermanent, which is, a way of reflecting on the experience, on the body that you have, the emotional habits you have, the sensations, the seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, the language, all these conditions that we cling to and identify with are conditioned by the cause of suffering. So wisdom is knowing the cause of suffering and the end of suffering. And then all Dhamma is not self is the second teaching of the Buddha. So this is, what do we mean by Dhamma? And, so with these words, wisdom and Dhamma, they're words in themselves. But Dhamma is what we begin to recognize, the deathless Dhamma, through wisdom, through investigating the conditioned realm, till we let go of it. See that this habitual clutching and holding and clinging to phenomena, whatever it might be, no matter how good or how depressing it is. The wisdom advice is to let go of it. And so letting go is the Buddha's wisdom in letting go of the causes of suffering, the desires that arise and cease in our conscious experience, till there's nothing left but pure awareness. Then wisdom is to know that, to realize this, this pure awareness, this pure conscious, empty consciousness, without forms, without something that changes and rises and ceases, is freedom, is liberation from the endless cycles of habit and that we tend to unconsciously perform in daily life, just operating out of habits, out of prejudice, out of bias, out of conditioning.
So for someone who'd like to develop that wisdom, how does it come about?
Well, just the wish to develop wisdom is the beginning. To recognize that you're not wise, that to recognize the first noble truth of suffering is an awakening with wisdom, because turning attention from, instead of seeing that wisdom is something you acquire from outside, you go and study philosophy in a university or memorize all the wise sayings of all the wise sages. I mean, you still have a collection of wise sayings, but you don't know what wisdom is. And so wisdom is, to recognize the ignorance is always sending our consciousness through the senses, through seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking, outside the objects. We're caught in this, we have eyes to see objects of sight and sounds to hear with the ears, and we see that consciousness is about senses. We believe that sensory consciousness is consciousness in itself, but sensory consciousness depends on eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, mind. It's not, if there's no senses, then if you go blind, you can't see anything. But consciousness still is present. So instead of sending one's attention always to the objects of the senses, we go inward and begin to be aware of, we become closer and closer, instead of looking at those beautiful flowers and reading books and surfing the iPad and computers. Like meditation is beginning, it's like anapanasati, with beginning to observe something that's happening here and now, but it's not, you can't see it, hear it, smell it, taste it, touch it. You can feel the inhalation is like this, exhalation is like this. So in the beginning stages of meditation, usually anapanasati, or mindfulness of the breathing, is recommended. And so that's, this is still setting the senses, observing an object of the body breathing, and then the postures, the sitting, standing, walking, lying down. So you're beginning to just notice the most obvious things that we tend to not notice until they become painful or unpleasant. So we don't really notice normal breathing until it becomes difficult. If we have asthma or some kind of difficult breath problem, then we become aware of it, but then we want to get rid of the discomfort. But normal breathing, we don't tend to pay any attention to it, or just normal sitting, standing, walking, lying down. So when we sit, we read books or talk on the iPhone or always sitting, doing something else with the mind, so it's like sending it out to things outside objects of the senses. In meditation, we're encouraged to observe the breathing and the posture. So it's beginning to develop wisdom, cultivate wisdom, and just seeing the realities that we experience through the body that we tend to take for granted, or through our fascination for the objects of seeing and hearing, smelling and tasting, we tend to not notice till they become painful or unpleasant. Then the whole attitude out of ignorance is to get rid of the discomfort or the pain or the unpleasurable effects, to find something that we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, thing that gives us pleasure or interest or comfort. So then, with awareness of feeling, of just vedana, of pleasurable, painful, neutral sensations in the body. So you're aware also in terms of the senses, we become aware of the pleasure and displeasure through seeing something beautiful or something ugly. So we're developing awareness, and with wisdom, because wisdom isn't judging. It's not about judging things, or it's not based on ideals of how things should be, but it's the knowledge of how things really are. So when we're sitting, sitting is like this, and it's not very interesting, because usually, we sit and read or watch television or do something. But just observing your own body sitting in a chair or sitting on a zafu is like this. And then in different meditation techniques stress the sitting posture and being very correct. But I don't think it's terribly important to have correct posture, but just to have the wisdom to the posture that you're in, to be aware that it's like this. Whether you're sitting on a zafu with a straight back and in full lotus, or you're sitting in a rocking chair, and it's still sitting, standing, walking, and lying down, because these are the four movements of your body that you use through your lifetime, that are generally, not given much attention till something happens, like if you break a leg, then you can't walk anymore. But then your whole aim is to get the broken leg healed so you can walk again, but not walking is like this. So suddenly you're using wisdom to be aware of the way it is, rather than wishing it were otherwise, or resenting the fact that your previous abilities are no longer able to operate. And then in pleasant, painful feelings and neutral sensations, noticing the neutral sensations on the body, because we don't notice that. Just like the pressure of your clothes touching your skin, and if it's too tight, then you notice it. If your trousers or your dress are too tight, then it's uncomfortable, so you notice the weight of it. You try to make it so it's pleasant again. You don't feel this restriction and unpleasant feeling in the body. So it's not about reacting. not about reacting to pleasure and pain, but observing pleasure is like this, pain, physical discomfort is like this, and neutral sensation, just like spend a lot of time just contemplating the way my robe touched my skin, or one foot is resting on the other, and my right hand touching my left hand. These are, neutral feelings. They're not pleasurable, they're not painful, but they can be observed. So you're increasing your ability to observe, to be the witness to the experience of your own body as it's breathing, inhaling, exhaling, sitting, standing, walking, lying down. And then it increases with the feeling of pleasurable, painful feelings. Because feeling, this, the sense realm, the senses, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, it's all about feeling. This is a sensory realm that we're experiencing. This is a sensory form. This body is totally sensitive, and it has these senses. So we're going to feel life, whether in its pleasant aspects, unpleasant aspects, and neutral aspects. And so we become aware of mental states, of emotions, of greed, of hatred, of delusion, as they arise and cease. So these mental states are very much what we, react to. We're very conditioned to react to pleasure, to enjoy it, and pain, to unpleasantness, to try to get rid of it, to blame it on somebody, to always find something to think about or blame, or to create more desire for more pleasure, and to get rid of pain. And then the neutral mental state of peace and contentment is generally, rarely recognized in the average human being. But as you become more aware, and wisdom is your modus operandi, this way of observing, witnessing the way things are, you have the insight into letting go of the conditioned realm, which is not, trying to get rid of it, not trying to annihilate it or condemn it, or to blame the unpleasantness of worldly life on external causes, but to understand it. So this is like wisdom, Dokudara Panya, or what do you say, above the world wisdom, or Dhamma wisdom, where we see things as they really are. Then we have the wisdom teachings of the Buddha, which is the Four Noble Truths, which, this is a very wise teaching that the Buddha gave after his enlightenment, his first sermon, and using suffering as the first noble truth to be understood, not to get rid of it. So we learn from our suffering. Here at Amaravati, we encourage people to use the suffering they experience here as a teacher. It's the first noble truth, rather than trying to complain about it or blame the suffering or misunderstandings or problems or crises of monastic life on yourself or somebody else. you see suffering as a noble truth. So this is wisdom, where just trying to avoid suffering and get rid of it or blame it on external causes is ignorance. One's caught in just the habit tendency of the thinking mind. If I'm suffering, then who's to blame for that? And because I want to be happy. I want happiness as the way I live my life. I want to live a happy life. I don't want to suffer. But the Buddha put suffering as a noble truth, which is to be investigated, to be understood, not to be annihilated. So then as we understand suffering, we're looking at it from the witnessing position. We're observing it because suffering arises and ceases, comes and goes. There's no permanent suffering. And as you understand suffering, you recognize the causes of suffering as this kind of blind attachment to desire for sensory pleasure and happiness, the desire to become something that you imagine, to become enlightened or become a happy person, a well-adjusted, normal person, which are good desires. Like Bhava Dhamma is usually, a very idealistic desire for the best, for solving all the problems of society, bringing world peace and fairness and justice and freedom and honesty to every situation, every country, and all the time is very kind of noble desires, but they are, there's not wisdom in that till we begin to see ideals as conditions that arise and cease. You can't live with an ideal in any, you can cling to ideals, and which makes one very critical of everything. So if you're very idealistic, then you're also very critical because the world isn't ideal. The world is like this, it's changing. Constantly changing. It has no stability in worldly dhammas because they inevitably change. And to desire stability, to desire, like an ideal can seem stable. You can have an ideal when you're 18 years old that you can carry with you till you're 100 years old. The ideal remains the same. But through that period of time, the world has constantly changed, and you're going to, end up being rather embittered or frustrated, cynical about life, because it isn't about perfection on the conditioned realm, because the conditioned world is, in very nature, is imperfect, unsatisfactory. So wisdom is recognizing that worldly conditions, sensory experience, sensory consciousness is imperfect. That's, and to want it to be perfect is a cause of suffering. Or wanting to get rid of the evil forces, the axis of evil, trying to destroy Satan and corruption and vice and immoral behavior and criminality and drug addiction and all the things that we think should, don't fit our ideal for society, wanting to get rid of greed, hatred, and delusion in yourself. Sometimes monks and nuns, spend their time trying to get rid of fear and trying to get rid of anger, get rid of jealousy, because ideally, one, as a monk, you don't want to feel jealous. You want to have this kind of grand kind of ideal of compassion and joy at other success. And, to have the Brahma Viharas operate in you permanently and not feel fear of anything is, desire to get rid of something you don't like, the unpleasantness, greed, hatred, delusion, fear, jealousy. But these are conditions that arise and cease like every other condition, good or bad, pleasant, painful, or neutral. So seeing that the desire to get rid of evil and faults and weaknesses and fear and desires is the cause of suffering. So wisdom informs us that these desires are impermanent. They arise and cease, and that which is aware of desire, which recognizes sensual desire for sense pleasures, and the desire for becoming something, getting some state that you imagine is perfect, or getting enlightened is a bhava dhamma, wanting to get enlightened, or wanting to get rid of anger is vipava dhamma, desire to get rid of something you don't want or like. And instead of getting rid of them, we let go of them. So this is wisdom informing us about letting go of desire. So it's not annihilation of desire, not about getting rid of desire, but seeing what desire is, understanding desire, very skillfully explained in the second noble truth of the Buddhist teaching. So how do you let go of desire? And just by trusting in awareness of that which is aware of desire, to be aware of desire without judging it is actually letting go of it. So when anger arises, the anger's like this, rather than I'm angry. How do I deal with my anger problem? You bear the anger, but you're witnessing it. And that which is aware of anger isn't angry. Conscious awareness isn't angry or greedy or confused. So that's why one can be aware of greed, hatred, and confusion. Because confusion can't be aware of itself, or greed can't be aware of itself, or anger can't be aware of itself. But that which is aware of greed, hatred, confusion, delusion is not greedy, angry, or deluded. And this is what mindfulness and wisdom are. Wisdom informs us. It's like this. It's not judging. Because to judge things, you have to, that influences our conditioned mind, our egos, our cultural conditioning, our religious conditioning, conventional conditioning, the way we think. We should have good and kind thoughts. We shouldn't have mean, selfish, nasty thoughts. Is all about right and wrong, good and bad. But it's like this is not a judgmental statement. It's using thought just to inform, to bear with the way the experience of the present moment as it arises, abides in the present and ceases. So wisdom knows that all conditions that arise must cease. Everything that is born must die. Everything that begins must end. And this awareness, this witnessing, this awareness of the subject, of the ego, awareness of the conventional conditioning, awareness of the thinking habits that we have, is what is our refuge. It's the Dhamma. It's the ultimate reality that we begin to recognize through this kind of investigation. So investigation, the whole Buddhist teaching is really about mindfulness and investigating the way things are. Not just believing Buddhist teachings, but Buddhist teachings are not doctrinal positions that we take, but skillful means, expedient means to understand that all conditions are impermanent, and Dhamma is not a separate personal self. So that's what wisdom is your nature. It's not about how well educated you are, or you've read all the wise sages of the past, and you believe in Buddhist teachings. It's not about acquiring wisdom from external sources, through books, through teachers, through degrees at universities, but in recognizing it's your nature. Wisdom is not something that is there's more or less in anyone. It's available, this kind of wisdom, to us all, free of charge.
Thank you, Paul.